It's really hot out there today, so I thought I'd stand in the shade and introduce this video. I'm going to start making a series of videos that I've called Chores, things to do in the garden. And in these videos, I'm simply going to walk you around the garden and show you things that I need to do in my garden. And we'll talk about plants. You'll have an opportunity to see some of my special plants. You'll learn how I take care of things. How do I handle bugs? What about plants that spread too much? You'll learn a lot about gardening, and each video will have a number of different clips in it, so that move along quite quickly. This is an arbor I built a number of years ago, and I really like it here in the garden. Kind of offsets a lot of the shrubbery that's around here, but I've really struggled to try and get something to grow up here. Now over here I put in a wisteria, and I had it here for a number of years. It just won't bloom. Again, I'm in zone 5, and in zone 5 wisteria are kind of iffy, so I'm trying to take it out. I cut it out this spring and even dabbed some Roundup on the stems to make sure I kill it. It's back again. I got to get rid of this because I have another wisteria that blooms at a much earlier age and should do better in my climate. Sometimes when you have plants that just don't do well, get rid of them. You might go through magazines and you see these beautiful pictures of this plant and you just want it in your garden, but if it doesn't grow for you, don't waste the time. Get rid of it and replace it. Now on this side I have the fiveleaf akebia, and I really like this plant because of the shade it gives. It's a bit weedy, grows lots of stems, and one problem I do have with it is it grows a lot of stems out this way in the garden, so each year I have to cut those back. But other than that, it's quite nice. It has some very interesting flowers, smells like chocolate, and it's really quite good here, except one problem. I'm trying to grow clematis on the back posts, and it's too shady for the clematis. They're not doing great, and I think it's because of this. I'm facing south here. Most of the light is this way, and this blocks too much of the light, and a lot of clematis don't do well in part shade. So what's the solution here? Well, it's really quite simple, but it's not quite as easy to do. I've taken some cuttings of this and rooted them, and I've moved a stem back there. So in the spring, I'm going to take this plant out completely because I have a new one growing back there. I'm going to get rid of this wisteria, and I'm going to move the 2 clematis on the back posts to the front posts. The clematis will now get more light, they'll do better, and then I'm going to have the vines at the back. So I'll still have shade in the center part here, but it won't keep my clematis from growing. It's going to take a couple years to make all these changes and have them growing well, but it's worth it in the long run. Don't be afraid to change the design in your garden. Not everything you do will work. These here are Crocosmia. They're not grown in a lot of gardens, but they probably should be. Many of them are red or a yellow color, and the red ones really attract the hummingbirds. A few years ago I was growing some Crocosmia, and the most common cultivar is called Lucifer. But my plants were quite short, and I was pretty sure it wasn't the true Lucifer. So I contacted all the master gardeners in my group and I said, look, if you're growing Lucifer, I'd like a piece of your plant so I can compare them. And so I got 3 different growers giving me a piece of plant. They were all labeled Lucifer, and I grew them one beside the other. That's really the only way you can compare plants. If you put one over there and one over there, you really can't compare them because the soil's a little different, the light's a little different. You need to put them together. And what I found was all 3 of them were different. Now one of them was quite tall, and it seemed to have the right coloration for Lucifer, and I think that's the right cultivar. This one here is a much more orange color, and it's shorter. I had it growing over here in a lot more shade, and it was doing okay, but it wasn't really happy, and it was getting crowded there, so I thought I'll move it over here. And this spot here is full sun. First thing in the morning to late at night, full sun. And it just loves it here. It's growing like crazy. It's covered in flowers. It's doing really well. In fact, it's almost doing too well for this spot. Unfortunately, many of the Crocosmias are not hardy in zone 5, so you do have to be careful which ones you pick. I have another yellow one that I grow, and it is partially hardy here. And when I buried the tubers, I put them extra deep. And sometimes that's enough to get them through our winters. That one's been in the garden for 6, 7, 8 years, and it comes back every year, but it's not nearly as spectacular as this plant. I had another one I tried and it never did come back. Now this is a real problem with plant names. You go to the nursery, you buy a plant, you think you've got Lucifer, you bring it home and it's something different. It's unfortunate. That happens even more if you're buying plants from plant sales, from hort societies, or getting plants from friends. Many times I find the names on these plants are wrong. If you're going to name your plant, please take the time to try and get it right. Don't guess at the name. If you're not sure, and I'm not sure what the name of this one is, I'm just going to pass it along as Crocosmia, Robert's orange colored plant. And I'll just tell people it has no name. Anyways, even without a name, this is a fantastic plant. Give it a try. These here are some alliums, and they're just finished flowering. They will make seeds. I love alliums because you can find alliums that bloom very early in the year, and the last plant that flowers in my garden is also an allium. So I have them flowering most of the year. The problem with allium is that some of them seed around far too much. So I'm kind of particular on which ones I keep. I'll grow them and I watch to see how many seedlings I get. If I start getting a lot of seedlings, I do one of two things. I yank the plant and throw it out. There's a lot more allium to try. You don't have to keep a thug. Or I make sure I deadhead. Now this one's kind of borderline. It doesn't seed around a whole lot, but I do have more than I need now. So ideally I'll come along and deadhead, and you can do that with your thumb. Just give it a snap. Or you can use pruners. If I start seeing too many plants, I'll pull them out. And I pulled one out here. You can see the top part. There's the bottom part. It's actually a plant that's now split into 5 different bulbs. Actually maybe 6. So if I wanted to, I could put them somewhere else and replant them. But in my case, I have too many of these, so I just discard that. Now, they don't always come out, so it's better to use a shovel rather than just pulling them out. But keep an eye on those allium. Great plants if you get the right ones and you deadhead. This is a variegated hydrangea. I think the species is a serrata. Don't usually grow these plants because they don't do great in a Zone 5 garden, but this one's supposed to be hardy enough to flower here. Now it was over there for a while, didn't do that well, so I moved it over here, give it a little more sun. We'll see how it does here. Even without flowers though, it's quite a nice plant. But I was walking by the plant today and I noticed a problem that we have to take care of right away. Each of these leaves is variegated, so it has a green center and a white edge. But if we look down here, there's one that's all green, and that happens a lot with variegated plants. This variegation reverts, and when it reverts, it goes back to its native color, which is almost always green. If we leave this, the green leaves grow stronger than the variegated leaves. Eventually, this will overtake the plant and it will all be green. We've got to do something about this, and the best time to do it is as soon as you see it. Get your pruners out, cut this off as close to the bottom stem as you can. Now unfortunately this is coming out right from the crown, so I'm going to move away the mulch and try and find where it starts and cut it right back to the start. I want it all off. Now next year I'm going to keep an eye on it, see if it does it again. Usually once a plant reverts, it's going to keep doing it, but sometimes it's just a one-time occur. Don't let the green stuff grow on variegated plant, and prune it out as soon as you see it. Right beside the hydrangea I have another plant that I really like. It makes these nice red flowers in late summer, and it'll now bloom pretty much until frost, so it gives me a long flowering period. This is a persicaria, and there are a number of cultivars with these red flowers. Some are a little redder, some are a little pinker. I have several of them, and quite honestly, they tend to look alike. The plant does spread a bit, so maybe every 2 years I come along and kind of cut it in half and get rid of half, give it to friends and let it regrow into that space. It does have one problem, and that is Japanese beetles. If you have a look at this leaf, it's not very green anymore. They've been sitting on the leaf and eating all the green parts, and all that's left are the veins. What do you do about this problem? Well, you have a couple options. The first one is that you can come out every day and pick these guys off. So what I do is I get a jar of water, put a little soap in it, and I just knock them into the jar. Especially early in the morning, they're still kind of dopey, and they're really easy to collect. It's now the middle of the afternoon and quite warm, and these guys have all flown away as soon as I sat down here. But in the morning, they're very lethargic and easy to collect. Do that every day and you will have less. Now the other alternative is just to say, well, so what? They're going to damage some of these leaves, but if you have a look, you'll see that most of the leaves are quite green and they're not eaten at all. The plant is quite vigorous. If a few leaves get eaten, it's not going to harm this plant. In fact, it grows a little too aggressively, so I could argue that the Japanese beetles are actually helping me. They're keeping the plant from getting too aggressive. So in my garden, what I do with most bugs is I leave them. If they're a real big problem on a plant, I usually get rid of the plant. It's easier than trying to deal with the beetles. One thing that is available commercially are Japanese beetle traps. They're these yellow things that you hang in your garden. Now they do work. They do collect beetles. The problem is that most home backyards are not big enough to use those traps. You will actually pull beetles in from the whole neighborhood to your yard. And even though you collect and kill a lot of beetles, your garden's still full of beetles. So what I recommend is you buy these and give them to a friend, one of your neighbors. Let them put them in their garden and you'll have less beetles. I hope you enjoyed this video.